Welcome to the PinkpillRx podcast, hosted by Katie and Jay Fillmore, where we navigate complex and thought-provoking topics surrounding women with a focus on education. For shorter form content, follow us on TikTok, Instagram, or YouTube at Caters88 or PinkpillRx.
That's Kators 88.
If you enjoy this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.
Before we begin, I want to remind our listeners that with the potential TikTok ban on the horizon, you can always find us on YouTube and Instagram. We're committed to keeping our community connected, so make sure to follow us on those platforms to stay up to date with all of our content. And hey, if you love what we do and want to support our mission, consider joining our Patreon for just $1 a month. Your contribution helps us continue bringing you this content. Also, if you have a story you'd like to share with our listeners and followers, please email us at pinkpillrx@gmail.com. All stories are shared anonymously unless specifically stated that you want your name included. And lastly, we are starting an email list that we will eventually use for announcements, podcast episode releases, and any updates. We're also playing around with the idea of sending fun facts and stats if there's enough interest. So if you'd like to be included in our emails, please use the link in the show notes to sign up. As a reminder, we're your hosts, Katie
And Jay
Fillmore. And we are thrilled to have you join us for another eye-opening episode. I would like to give a trigger warning saying that we are talking about some sensitive subjects today. Childhood sexual abuse, marital rape, sexual assault comes up. If that's something you're not in a good place to listen to right now, I just want to give you a heads up that this might not be the episode for you. Now let's begin. How you doing, Jay?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Katie?
Hanging in there. We're recording this over nap time, so we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Today, we have a special episode that we are titling, Can You Talk About? Because we get so many emails, messages, comments with ideas of things to talk about or questions from followers asking us to talk about certain things. So I figured for this episode, we can just do a whole conglomerate of topics that our listeners and followers want us to talk about.
I'm really excited about this because I don't know what any of these are.
So can we talk about it, Jay?
Yeah, we can talk about it.
So the first one is, can you talk about words that are no longer allowed to be used if seeking grant funding for medical research? Have you heard anything about this?
No.
You have heard about the political climate, obviously, and how DEI is being kind of taken out of the workplace per executive order on a federal level.
Yeah, I've been following.
Okay, so they sent out this list of terms that are to not be included when writing for grant funding, and also this list of terms to basically amend/scrub studies of these terms that currently exist or are currently pending within the CDC.
Because you're not going to get funding if they're in there?
Yes.
Okay.
Or it will, I should say this. From what I understand, it will trigger a review of funding. These words will automatically trigger a manual review. Okay. So at the National Science Foundation, staff have been combing through thousands of active science research projects alongside a list of these keywords to determine if they include activities that violate executive orders that President Donald Trump issued in his first week of office.
Okay.
So those orders include to recognize only 2 genders and to roll back diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. This is where it's coming from. Here are some of the words that you are not to use. Activism, activist, advocacy, advocate, advocates, barrier, barriers, biased, biased towards, biases, biases towards, BIPOC, Black and Latinx, community diversity, community equity, cultural differences, cultural heritage, culturally responsive, disabilities, disability, discrimination, discriminated, discriminatory, diverse backgrounds, diverse communities, diverse community, diverse groups, diversified, diversify, diversifying, diversity and inclusion, diversity, equity, and it goes on, equity, ethnicity, female.
What?
Females, gender, gender diversity, genders, inclusive, inclusivity, women, racial, race, racism, trauma, undervalued, underserved, victim, women, and underrepresented.
Okay.
I just shortened that
It
list.
was exhausting sitting and listening to the list and restraining myself from chiming in every few words. That was exhausting.
Note that men and male is not on this list, but
Noted.
women and female is.
So and these are before I start, pontificating here. These are scientific publications are included in this.
Oh, that's what it is about, is scientific publications.
God. So if you're having any type of scientific publication that has to do with, let's say, the effects of medications on men versus women.
That would trigger a manual review to see if that would qualify for funding.
Oh my gosh, because then you can't use women or gender or female. How are you supposed to do any type of study and have any type of language? Could you X chromosomal? I mean, what do you do? This is okay. There's a few. I want to make some notes on a few.
Absolutely.
And then maybe we can talk about the big picture behind this thing. First off, I don't understand. I think it's infuriating that they are saying all of these words essentially are automatically promoting some type of politically left agenda. Like, I don't know, the word activist is going to do that. Like, activists can't be left or right for different issues. Gender can just be scientific. You know what I mean? It doesn't have to be, it's not political all the time. And
well, isn't that their whole point? They're trying to make gender scientific and not political, yet it's on the list.
Well, you can't use female. That's about as scientific as it gets. You're not saying woman, women. Female is much more of a scientific term. Like, what the heck? The word discrimination, I'm sorry, isn't that literally in amendments to our Constitution? And now you can't use it because you're going to get pulled for manual review for funding? It's in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Am I wrong with that?
No, you're not wrong. You're absolutely right. It is frightening. It's frightening.
My gosh.
Because they've also pulled publications that have these words in them for manual reviews. So there is so many articles that were on the CDC website, okay, that have been pulled off because it's had the word women in it. This includes like birth control guidelines. Like if people have like counterindications health-wise to certain kinds of birth control, there was on the CDC website a list that doctors could troubleshoot. It is no longer available.
This is so silly because, like I've heard the campaign say, we don't want to be divided. We don't want to keep seeing America divided because of gender and race and da-da-da-da-da. So we're going to take out all this language and stop focusing on it. Okay? But then what you're doing is you're denying reality, particularly in the scientific community where race matters with how medications affect each other and gender matters. Or I should say sex matters, but yeah.
It absolutely does.
Oh my God. And like other things like inclusive and inclusion. Okay, you don't want to just include as many Americans as possible. You're automatically reading that word as being a left talking point or something. Like what?
Social justice is also one. Sociocultural, stereotypes, and systemic.
Does that say status?
Yes, status is another one.
Probably because of immigration status, but just status in general. Victim is on there?
Yeah.
I still can't believe women and female is on there.
And we know that women and, like you said, different races and ethnicities metabolize drugs differently, respond to things differently, even deal with certain health conditions at a different rate.
Right.
We are erasing people.
Yeah. It's like when we had Mackenzie on last week and the whole phrase, I don't see color.
Yeah.
Like, that's kind of like what this looks like. We don't see gender. We don't see color. But, those things matter scientifically.
They
very,
do matter.
very, very much so. You want to just deny that a certain type of person exists?
Yeah, they're erasing people. And it's very scary. And it's very scary for basically anyone who's not a man who's white.
Yeah.
On top of that, with this whole DEI thing, the initiatives that are being basically wiped away, washed away, the Navy and the Marine Corps have both paused their sexual harassment trainings. They've indefinitely paused them.
Well, that probably gives male Marines the impression of they can do whatever they want.
Yeah, sexual harassment and assault is rampant in the military.
Oh my gosh. Unbelievable.
So,
my gosh.
So we talked about it. There it is. That's pretty shocking and pretty upsetting. And we will keep tracking that and seeing how that kind of shakes out.
So tired of the news.
So my next question, can you talk about incest and its link to teen pregnancy?
Whoa. Whoa. Okay. I did not see this one coming.
It was kind of hard to find research on this. This is what I found. There was a study that took data between 1994 and 2015. So they went through 311 adolescent pregnancies resulting from sexual violence between 1994 and 2015.
Okay.
And they found that 44.1% of those were due to incest.
Whoa. Pause. Edit out the pause if you need to. Whoa. So, okay, are we talking parental? Are we talking like extended familial? Are we talking sibling?
It was hard to get that information, but I did find some other stats that I can at least share. So at least 1 in 4 girls experience sexual abuse.
Like just in general?
Just in general.
25% of all girls in our country?
Yes, in the U.S. This is U.S. stats. Thank you for clarifying.
Experience what?
Child sexual abuse. I don't know how you make it out as a woman in your life not experiencing something like that, because 1 in 4 girls, and then it's 1 in 6 women are raped.
25% of girls?
I believe the stat for boys is 1 in 6.
1 in 6? 1 in 6 for boys? So you pull a kindergarten class, 24 kids. Let's say 12 boys and 12 girls. So you're going to have 3 girls and 2 boys in one kindergarten class.
Correct.
On average. Oh my gosh. That's one of the most horrendous stats I have heard. As a father, I got 4 girls.
It's terrifying.
Is this someone you know? Is this a peer?
It is typically somebody that you know. Yes. High statistics of somebody that you know.
This is going to change my paradigm a little bit.
90% of childhood sexual abuse victims know the perpetrator in some way.
I just took one of our kids to a birthday party today. How can I leave my kid anywhere?
For children under 12, about 84% of sexual victimization occurs in the residence that the child lives.
84% happens in the home?
Yes.
So you're talking a sibling or a parent, right?
I mean, possibly. Or it could be an extended family member or a close family friend. I know that's really heavy.
Yeah.
But another stat that I found is that an estimated 60% of teen pregnancies are preceded by experiences of molestation, rape, or attempted rape, and the average age of their offender is 27 years old.
60% of teen pregnancies are preceded by those things?
Yes. It would fall under statutory.
And what was the average age you said?
27 years old of the perpetrator.
God. These children, Katie, it's their lives, and they're so helpless because they're kids. And even the older kids, like you don't know the world and you don't know how to protect yourself, and you don't. Oh my God.
Well, and it's so sad because that is probably honestly underreported, and a lot of childhood survivors have either repressed that memory or that they don't really deal with that until they're much older. Like as far as processing it.
Mm-hmm.
Because as a kid, you don't know what's normal and what's not normal. Also, you have a lot of guilt as a kid. I've had people message me talking about how they've had guilt because, it felt good, so they had guilt about that. Or, they after like an initial like violation that they then asked for continual like interaction and stuff like that. It's like, you're a kid.
Yeah, you're a kid.
You're a kid. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter what you asked or didn't ask for or consented to or didn't consent to, because you can't consent.
No, your brain's not developed enough. You don't know what you're doing.
So if that's you,
none of it's your fault.
None of it.
No. You're not old enough to be responsible for that area of life.
And if that's you, I'm so sorry that is what you have experienced.
Yeah, I am so sorry. You were victimized and used. And it was not your fault. Gosh. These are children. I cannot believe those stats. 1 in 4 girls and 1 in 6 boys. 84% in the home.
Okay. Could you talk about the abortion bills being passed that make abortion considered homicide? So in South Carolina, there was a bill that was introduced December 2024 that would classify abortion at any stage as homicide, making it eligible for the death penalty. This bill is currently pending in the State House Judiciary Committee. So to put that into perspective for you, not only is that just crazy, but that would mean that the penalty for the woman who let's say, got raped and chose to have an abortion or became pregnant after incest, that the punishment for the woman would be significantly more severe than the punishment for the rapist or the person who inflicted the sexual abuse. Other states that have similar legislation going on right now is Oklahoma, North Dakota.
Of course, we already heard things about Oklahoma a while ago.
Oh, get this though. North Dakota and Indiana.
Indiana?
They are all considering classifying abortion as homicide. Where the death penalty is still legal, homicide can be prosecuted in that direction. And get this, a rapist, for example, cannot be given the death penalty because it's against federal law. The death penalty cannot be imposed on non-homicidal crimes. It's unconstitutional under the 8th Amendment, per a 2008 U.S. Supreme Court ruling, Kennedy versus Louisiana.
My mind's just going through like, okay, let's say that happens to you as a woman, and then you use a self-defense because this was done to you.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or for rape, or it's life-threatening to you medically. But then even so, you have to go through the whole trauma and financial depletion of a trial on top of having to have an abortion, which has its own emotional and psychological effects, regardless of why you do it.
This is the thing about abortion that really gets me, and it's always gotten me. We see the extreme on both sides. We see the super, super conservative side should be prosecuted as homicide and like burn down the abortion clinics. Like, that's the face of the conservative pro-life movement. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, all you see is the women saying, my body, my choice. I believe that. Your body, your choice. I do believe that. But what I am going to say, a lot of times women who get abortions, usually it is a resource problem. Usually it's a domestic violence issue. Usually it's, when I say resources, I mean financial, I mean housing. It's an unhoused problem. It's a
family support
problem. It's like, it's so much deeper. No one wakes up in the morning and just says, man, I really hope one day I'll be able to have an abortion. Nobody does that. That's not how this works. We miss the woman in it all. We need to bolster support for domestic violence, for sexual assault, for resources, for Medicaid, for welfare, for SNAP benefits, for all these things.
That's a really good point. I agree. I think you're right.
Both sides need to be pro-woman. And pro-woman would be taking care of the woman.
It's not pro-choice and pro-life. It's just pro-woman.
Yeah, just pro-woman.
Period. That's great. I love that.
Moving on. Another question that I was asked after our marital rape episode was, would you consider sleeping sex rape if you're married?
Are you going to define sleeping sex?
What do you think I mean by that?
I'm going to assume one spouse initiates and has sex with the other spouse while the other spouse is asleep.
Correct.
And they wake up during?
Or maybe not, but yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean that's pretty much rape.
I would
I
would consider that rape, unless this is a conversation that you guys had ahead of time that was a consensual thing, and that's like a thing that you want to do and you have communicated that and it's mutually agreed upon. I even think then it can be a little gray because, again, I think consent is ongoing, enthusiastic, and in real time. So the unconsciousness part kind of throws me a little bit there with that. But I'm sure that there are people who have a thing for that and that mutually agree upon that and mutually consent upon that. I'm sure that that's a thing. But if that is not the context in which that is being practiced, then I would classify that as non-consensual sex.
Yeah.
Which therefore, in my mind, would be rape, marital rape in this situation. But in general, if you're in a relationship.
Yeah, you still need consent within a marriage, and there isn't if one person's asleep. I mean, to me, it just seems pretty cut and dried.
Okay, great. Well, we'll move on then.
Yeah.
Could you talk about the difference in funding when it comes to women-specific ailments compared to erectile dysfunction?
You got data?
I do have some data.
This is going to be interesting.
And I'm going to refer to erectile dysfunction as ED. To start out with, ED research versus endometriosis research.
Oh, man. You're just coming out swinging.
So from 2019 to 2023, erectile dysfunction, they found, had $1.24 billion worth of funding during that period of time, which was 6 times higher than funding for endometriosis.
Oh my gosh, that is a massive difference.
I will say that the NIH funding did increase from $13 million in 2020 to $29 million in 2023 for endometriosis. So that was a good thing.
That's good.
So that's better. It's increasing, but it's still not there.
Yeah, definitely not there.
There was a study that was also done on endometriosis that we were talking about yesterday. And that study, that was actually funded. This was a funded study for endometriosis. And it was on the level of attractiveness.
Oh my gosh.
People with endometriosis had versus people without it.
And that's what some of the precious funding is going towards, a study like that?
Yes.
That is...
It was attractiveness of people with endometriosis versus people without. And the different kinds of endometriosis they compared. Like if you had endometriosis in this area, how attractive were you compared to this area?
I thought that was nuts when you shared that with me yesterday, but I didn't even know about the funding comparison. You're already just not having enough funding compared to other things like ED, but then the little funding you have, you're spending it on crap like that.
It is outrageous.
What is up with that? That is unbelievable. Can I circle back to something real quick? You said ED 39 million a year, NIH, endometriosis 29 a year. Is there a treatment for endometriosis?
No.
Is there a treatment for ED?
Yes.
But we're putting more funding into ED than the thing we don't have any treatment for yet.
That's a good point. Now, you know what? People are gonna be really, really technical with me here.
Okay.
There technically is treatment for endometriosis, like they'll put you on birth control, or else it can have like surgical intervention. But both of those are really subpar. Like they don't really fix the problem.
So birth control, it would be considered an off-label treatment.
Correct.
Right?
Yes.
But so there's no quote unquote label treatment other than surgery.
To my knowledge, no.
So guys can take a pill, but women either have to take an off-label treatment or have surgical intervention. And there's no more funding for ED that already has a pill than for endometriosis.
That's a great point.
That's wild. What the heck?
Dude, the healthcare field in women is so screwed up. In 2015, there were 5 times more scientific studies on erectile dysfunction than premenstrual syndrome, so PMDD.
How do we still need all these studies? What more is there to learn about it? That seems really wrong. PMDD like really affects your life. And not that ED isn't, but like that's just having that big of a disparity. Like ED having over a 4-year period over $1 billion. It just seems that the disparity is huge.
Do you want to hear something terrible?
Sure.
There was a trial going on where there was a medication that they showed relieved menstrual pain and like PMDD symptoms.
Okay.
Research had to stop due to lack of funding.
But they will fund studies with endometriosis about attractiveness. Oh, where do I live? What is this place? There's no logic anywhere. There's only like self-service and money.
In 2024, there was an analysis of common medical interventions. So just common medical interventions that are provided for various reasons. 64% of them were found to disadvantage women due to lower effectiveness, access, or both, compared to just 10% of men.
This is just all so wild in the healthcare like industry. All the things that you cited to me, not just today, but like in other episodes and stuff. Oh my gosh.
There was a study that was done in Denmark, and they did it cumulative over the last 21 years. And it showed that women were diagnosed later than men for more than 700 diseases. Part of the travesty of it all is that research and development resources are often prioritized by like years of life lost rather than quality of life. And that disadvantages women because they have a longer life expectancy, but they tend to have a poorer average quality of life due to certain conditions, but they get shorted because they live longer. So it doesn't technically take life away. It takes quality of life away.
So disheartening. It's just so disheartening.
A 2021 study showed that in 75% of cases where a disease impacts one gender, the research funding patterns favor men. Twice as much funding goes to diseases that disproportionately affect men compared to those that mainly impact women. We're going to end with some good news, though.
Thank you.
I know you said that you need that in your life, so we're going to end with some good news.
Great.
The FDA has officially limited toxic lead exposure in some baby food products, which is expected to limit lead in about 20 to 30% of baby foods. The limits aren't mandatory, but it opens up litigation for those baby food manufacturers.
Man, it sounded like good news, and then just got less good and less good and less good. First, you said some baby foods.
I know.
And then I'm thinking, I didn't even know lead was in baby foods.
Good news is...
So it was kind of like bad news, too. And then it's not, what did you say? It's not illegal? Or it's not mandatory?
It's not mandatory.
But but it's not mandatory, but it opens them up to litigation, so that's good.
Yeah.
My gosh.
That one was a little tricky. I'm sorry. Maybe that wasn't as good of news as it could have been.
No, it didn't really feel good. It kind of feels the same as the other stuff. I didn't know lead was in there. And then the good news is like, well, we did just barely less than barely more than what we were doing before.
Okay.
Like,
Listen.
we weren't an F, we're a D- now. Get that right.
Okay. I am going to share one last story, and it's a feel-good story. Okay. I think it's a feel-good story.
Okay.
Do you know why the L comes first in LGBTQI+? Because
No,
it used to be GLBT.
Oh, I've never heard or seen that in my life.
That was in the 80s and the 90s. But I'm going to tell you why.
Why?
A listener wrote in, and she did provide a source as well. She wrote in and said, after listening to the latest episode of the podcast today, you had asked for badass female stories. And I have one for you.
Oh, okay, cool.
That you may or may not already be familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
While this is not a personal story, I find it to be truly inspiring, and I think it would be awesome to share with listeners. In the 80s and early 90s, the queer community was referred to as GLBT. And this was a really difficult time for the community because of the AIDS crisis and so much widespread hate and discrimination. While the GLBT movement was progressing, there was more of a focus on gay men and not so much female lesbians and other female-presenting queer folks in general. The feminist movement had not taken off quite yet within the queer community at this time. While in the midst of the AIDS crisis, the disease was disproportionately affecting gay men. And since many people were afraid of catching the disease, medical treatment and other resources were extremely difficult to come by. Lesbians were at the forefront of helping gay men with medical care. They donated blood, provided food and shelter, and stepped in to nurse the ill when many refused to treat them with care and respect. Their willingness to support gay men in their time of need sparked a closer relationship between the two groups. Due to the camaraderie that was sparked out of such a hateful and dark time for the queer community, the movement and community had been renamed as LGBT to honor the lesbians who stepped up to help gay men during the AIDS crisis when so many others refused.
Whoa.
Isn't that a beautiful story?
That is a really beautiful story.
Yeah.
Man, what just love and compassion. And then to change the acronym in honor of them.
Yeah, how beautiful.
What reciprocation and what appreciation, and that's beautiful.
Yeah, so that's a feel-good story that we get to end on today.
And they just, they saw these men as people and not just carriers.
Exactly. Humanity. We have to keep seeing people as human.
First, above anything else.
Everybody.
You have to. You can't dehumanize people. It has to be human first. Person first.
If you have a badass woman story, or if you have a feel-good story, or you just have a story in general, please share it at PinkpillRx@gmail.com. We would really love to hear it. This was probably one of my more favorite episodes because it is really conducive with my ADHD tendencies. So I liked it too. I liked jumping all over the place. Yeah. So if there are things that you would also like us to talk about or ideas that you have, also please share them at the PinkpillRx@gmail.com email. We would really appreciate it. We love talking about this stuff, even though it's difficult to talk about.
I'm going to stumble through this, but I know that our women listeners really have to endure a lot. And I want to recognize that and just say, I think all the hardships you have to face, you're incredibly strong. And that really sucks. Don't like it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. And thank you for to you, Jay. Thank you for listening. And thank you for being attentive to these gaps.
You're welcome.
Okay. Well, we'll see you next week.
Yeah. I hope you have a really great week. I hope for those of you listening, something was intriguing or sparked a curiosity, or you felt affirmed or challenged. Stay educated. Take the pink pill. If you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a follow and maybe a nice review.